You know, the Academy Awards are supposed to be all about celebrating the best in film, right? But what if the 2024 ceremony was something else entirely? Today, we're jumping into a YouTube commentary that makes a pretty bold claim. The show wasn't really about movies at all. It was, according to this source, a direct political shot at mainstream America. So the whole thing kicks off with this central claim you're seeing right here. The commentary argues the event wasn't so much about movies as it was about Hollywood making it clear it wants to take back control and punish what it calls flyover country. All right, let's dig into how they actually build this case.
To get our heads around this, we're basically going to follow the source's logic through 5 key steps. We'll look at the politics on stage, we'll decode those infamous diversity rules, and then we'll get to what the source calls a message of revenge, and finally, a warning about where all of this might be headed.
Okay, first up, the main idea. The source claims this wasn't just a few political moments scattered here and there. No, this was a unified, aggressive message coming from the entire industry. The commentary argues that Hollywood is essentially signaling that it's out for revenge against anyone who doesn't see the world their way. So, the source really paints this picture of an industry that's, desperate. It claims Hollywood is collapsing but is trying to claw its way back to power. The argument is that the whole evening was basically a thinly veiled threat. So, what's the proof? What examples does the source actually give to back up a claim that big? And that brings us right to the specific moments from the show that the commentary points to as evidence of this big political agenda. Let's take a look. First on the list is Conan O'Brien's opening joke. Now, a lot of people probably heard that and thought, okay, that's just a classic even-handed Conan joke. But the source sees it very differently. It argues this was a warning shot, basically telling everyone that only one political view was going to be welcome that night.
Then the commentary moves on to a whole series of statements made on stage. It calls out an actress for wearing a pin for a ceasefire that the source claims was already in place for months. And then it questions Javier Bardem's statement about Palestine. The point the source is making here is that these aren't just random opinions. It's arguing they're kind of ill-informed performative acts that are really just there to push a specific Hollywood story.
Another moment the source zeroes in on is an acceptance speech from a Korean director who apologized that it took so long for someone like her to get an award. The commentary calls this breaking a pretend glass ceiling, and it makes a very specific claim that in the world of animation, Asian representation is already equal to white representation. So from its perspective, the apology just didn't add up. Okay, now we're getting into what might be the most fascinating part of the source's argument. It's a deep dive into the Academy's new diversity and inclusion rules for Best Picture. And, well, the claim is they're not at all what they seem. So, here's the deal. The commentary explains that for a film to even be in the running for Best Picture, it has to check off at least 2 out of 4 new diversity boxes. The source focuses on the on-screen stuff. You can see it laid out here. Standard A1 is about having lead actors from underrepresented groups. Standard A3 is about the main story being about one of those groups. But the one to really pay attention to, the one the entire argument hinges on, is Standard A2. That's the one that says 30% of the whole cast has to come from at least 2 underrepresented groups. And this is where the source says the whole thing gets interesting. It all comes down to how the Academy actually defines an underrepresented group. You've got the list here, various racial groups, LGBTQ+ folks, people with disabilities, and then, right at the end, the one the source highlights, women. So what's the big reveal here? According to the commentator, it's that the whole system is basically fake. The argument is this. Since women are listed as underrepresented, despite being, half the population, pretty much every single movie out there is going to hit that 30% mark for Standard A2 without even trying. The source claims this makes the whole diversity thing a total sham. It looks good on paper, but it's really designed to do something else. So, the big takeaway from the source is that this isn't really about inclusion at all. It's a performance. And as the quote says, the system is really just against white dudes. That's the core claim, that the whole thing is just a facade. Okay, so from the rules themselves, the source then turns to the biggest award of the night, Best Picture. And according to this commentary, the movie that won is the final, ultimate proof of Hollywood's real, hostile intentions. And look, the source doesn't pull any punches here. It makes a really direct accusation that the hidden theme of the winning movie is literally a fantasy about physically destroying conservatives. So to support this pretty heavy claim, the commentary brings up a review from Variety, and it zeroes in on this one phrase, cathartic political art. For the source, this is the smoking gun. It sees this as proof positive that the film was meant to be exactly what it claimed, a celebration of a violent political fantasy.
And all of this leads up to the source's final point, which is basically a warning. It presents what it sees as two completely different paths for the future of entertainment.
And this slide really spells it out. You've got two possible futures here. On one side, path one, you have a more democratized world with independent creators, on platforms like YouTube, calling the shots. But on the other side, path two, you have a future where a vengeful Hollywood gets its power back and, as the source puts it, gets its revenge. So when you boil it all down, the commentary's final message is that the entire Oscar ceremony was a signal. It was Hollywood showing its hand, telling everyone which of those two futures it's fighting for. The source argues that the industry is sending a clear message about what it's going to do if it gets total cultural control back.
So the commentary we've looked at today definitely presents a very stark, very specific view of the Academy Awards, framing it as more than just an awards show, but as a major battle in a much bigger culture war. And that really just leaves us with a final question to think about. What does the future of entertainment actually look like? And maybe more importantly, who gets to decide?